You are now in the Backcourt, a Brooklyn Nets podcast presented by Ticketmaster, and we are just flying through the season. This is the 12th episode we've recorded, and when I say we, I mean me, Lucas Kaplan of Nets Film Focus, and a writer covering the team for NetsDaily. And alongside me, as always, is Sarah Kustok, who is actually with the team as they are on a long West Coast road trip, stopping in the middle of the country too. Sarah, how are we doing?
We're doing good. We are. We're in the midst of things, so we're rolling along here and getting set for, which I know this will drop after, but getting set for game tonight in Portland. So it's been fun so far.
Yeah, it's the third on the road of six straight on the road. The Nets kind of doing this looping bit across the country. They start in Denver, then Utah, then 3 games right on the West Coast. Then they come back to OKC on their way back to Brooklyn, which makes 6 games. Sarah, are you still doing, you running every day? Are you running in the
I
elevation when you get to
am.
Denver? How's
Lucas,
that on the lungs?
these are good. They make them strong. These are some of my favorite running cities, good yoga spots.
Mm,
Yeah, it's also been I love hot weather. We don't need to talk about this for too long, but I mean, who doesn't love being in Miami, Orlando,
of
all those
course.
places that it's been perfect. And I feel like in Utah, in Denver, here in Portland, it's been like about 40, high 30s, 40. And sometimes I like when it's a little bit of a chill. It feels good for the muscles, good to get the blood flowing. So yeah, it's been that part has been fantastic. I'll give you that much. So yeah.
And then you can relate to the players when they're in Denver and Utah playing in elevation. You have sort of a
Oh,
firsthand,
I'm absolutely running that hard and fast.
of course, and jumping that high, as we all know.
As some people ask, I'm like, you do know I'm not running that fast where you feel the effects. But
I
yeah,
don't
no,
I don't
we're
know.
going.
They're showing your highlights every game now on Yes Network. It's like a
It's
recurring
it's
feature.
it's becoming a little bit much. I don't know. I feel like they found him and then they just anytime someone tees him up. But yeah, that
Yeah.
that needs to RIP kind of soon.
Yeah, they're going to the well a lot. It's okay though. We won't bring that up. This is a podcast audio format, though. You know, if you're watching on YouTube, no highlights this time. To get back to the Nets, though, they are currently on a season high 5-game losing streak. Now they're on the road. As we mentioned, they're going to play Portland tonight as we record, and it's an opportunity for a big bounce back because of those 5 losses. Really, their best opportunity for a win came in Utah, came down to the last second twice in regulation and in overtime. So I'm just curious. Let's start, with the first person perspective. Sarah, what is the vibe around the team? How is it going? They're in a tough spot with a lot of injuries, but still losing 5 straight, not
I
always the
I
best.
think that's a big part of it. These guys are all competitors. You know that they would not be here if they were not. Same goes for Jordy Fernandez's coaching staff. Everyone wants to win, and you could talk about building habits. You can talk about the things you're continuing to do to improve. But if things change, there's a feeling you get when you win, and so I do think that's an aspect, but we have talked about this since the preseason, Lucas. I feel like in the start of the season, this is a tremendous group of character guys that are on the team. The chemistry they have with one another on and off the floor, the respect that they have for one another and have for the game and showing up the same way each and every day. It's those type of habits that they're creating that I think have been an example of that's how they're gonna show up. And so I still think that, the energy, the vibes, all of that. Yeah, are they frustrated, maybe they dropped a game in Utah? Absolutely. But I think overall, it's been impressive to me the entire of the season. I think you have some great leaders on the group that's a part of that. I think the coaching staff is a part of that. They make sure to bring a light and a joy and an energy with what they're doing, regardless of circumstance. And I think the second part of that, as you mentioned, there are injuries. They're playing, they've been playing without a handful of key players. And so the hope you get Cam Johnson back, you get D'Angelo Russell back. Those that will help fortify things. I think we've seen Zaire Williams come back and be great. Some other opportunities, which I'll know we'll get to, with some players that have grabbed that and taken advantage of that. And so there's so many positive things to pull that despite the fact a lot of these games have ended in L's, there's parts of it that you feel like, oh, that that's a win. That's a success. That's a good thing that you're going to now kind of tack on as building blocks. And that's, I think, what they're trying to hold on to at this point until they hopefully, get their way back into the win column.
Yep, and that was the vibe, I think, during the home losses, just before they hit the road. I was there for two games that, they played, one game actually that they played before we last recorded, or after we last recorded, which was a home loss against the Pistons. And yet, the vibes are not very downtrodden. I think that's because you have a lot of young, new, fresh faces, two-way players, or guys getting back from injury. So, if you're looking at, you might be playing a five-man lineup, or at least four of Reese Beekman, two-way player, Tyrese Martin, two-way guy, Tosan Evbuomwan, two-way, Day'Ron Sharpe returning from injury, Zaire Williams returning from injury, and all of the guys I just mentioned have had really strong, impressive moments recently, and I think that keeps the vibes high. I don't want to pick on the Detroit Pistons, but when they lost 27 straight games last year, by the way, they're having a great season this year.
Yep.
Shows you how quickly it can turn around. But when they lost 27 straight last year, it felt very morbid because it was kind of the same players struggling, getting losses. Whereas the Nets, it does genuinely feel different. Like Jordy Fernandez is walking up to the podium after losses and saying, well, you know what? I thought Tosan Evbuomwan debuted today for us, and he was great. I thought Tyrese Martin played the most minutes he's played yet, and he was great. And in all these situations, it's hard to disagree with him because we really do see that happening. The one thing I would also like to add is that, as you mentioned, playing in Portland tonight, a lot of these injured guys, there were 10 guys out when they lost to the Pistons. Day'Ron came back. Ben Simmons came back. Now we have 3 more guys upgraded from out to questionable. So it's definitely a situation that's trending upward. And I would say the loss to Utah was a trend upward, even though it was an L. They really played a more complete game than they played in a little while. What did you see in that Utah game? And what do you think, since this episode will drop after they play Portland, that they can take forward, positives or maybe negatives at the very end that they can learn from? What were your feelings leaving such a heart-pounding game?
Yeah, I think when it came to Utah, the interesting part, and you look at some of the numbers, but the glaring part to me is that they just shot the ball really poorly from three. And sometimes that dictates a lot of how they're playing. It dictated the runouts that the Jazz were able to get. And Utah, similarly, is a really hungry team. And the same things we're saying about these Nets players of guys having an opportunity, that's how they're approaching it. Look at it. Will Hardy has been a tremendous coach for them. You mentioned those opportunities first starting at the end of the game. Like you couldn't have set up better shots and for yourself, Nick, and he misses. That happens. Like that's gonna happen in games. Are you disappointed and frustrated? Yeah, but you know what? That's a part of it. And it wasn't just one play or a couple plays at the end of the game. There was stretches throughout. And I think it's for this group the focus on how do you try and mitigate some of those stretches by teams that you're struggling to get stops or your shot's not going through, and then on the flip side of things, you're not getting stops, and um, I think overall, though, for the group, they took care of the ball better. That's been one thing that you kind of take a look at. And again, I know we'll get to them. There were some big games and really solid, impressive moments by players. Tosan Evbuomwan being one of those, but even I know the numbers or the shooting numbers weren't the same as we saw the previous nights or other times. With Tyrese Martin again with a really solid night. Zaire Williams had some really big plays. The pace that they were playing at, there was a lot of things to draw from that game that you liked, and you don't like the outcome. But there was parts of it you say, okay, these are parts that you're going to improve upon. And then when you do reinsert a Cam Johnson, when you do reinsert D'Angelo Russell, those play that will make a difference.
I totally agree. The Nick Claxton, missed layup is kind of emblematic of the way that they lost. It was a tough lob. It was just maybe an inch behind him, and it rolls around the rim. He maybe makes that more often than he doesn't. But was there, I guess, a commonality in plays down the stretch? Because they actually shot better from three in the second half. I know they kind of dug themselves a hole, and they ended up shooting 10 of 40 from three against the Jazz. One of those things where, Noah Clowney, has had a great 3-point shooting season. I've written about it a lot. He goes 0 for 7. You know, he goes 3 for 7. You're shooting 33%. It's a way different game. That stuff happens. Do you think there's anything with the late game execution, any commonalities, or was it really just a matter of couple plays, couple balls, just don't really bounce your way?
I think more of it was on the defensive end, if you're going to
Mm-hmm.
point to anything. And again, that's where I'll circle back to Will Hardy and that Utah coaching staff. Very good in those type of situations. They've had a lot of practice at it. But there was a couple breakdowns that you thought the Jazz got a good shot, or the bucket by Collier where he kind of pushed it
Right.
through the defense. You think you have a split, you're not getting tight enough to try and close him out, and he gets and he almost bobbled. I thought he was about to turn the basketball over. So that's
Yeah.
that's where I mean, like there was small plays that you give credit to Utah about hitting some tough shots. I think for the Nets offensively, for the most part, and if I remember, they were creating good looks. I don't remember that many. And Lucas, you probably rewatched it, so I don't recall many where it was like that was a really disjointed offensive possession, or they put up a shot. Like for the most part, I felt like
Mm-hmm.
they were getting looks. They were sharing the basketball. They were working their in and outs that just didn't end up going through. And you're gonna have nights like that, and that's where kind of circle back to what you're doing on the defensive end matters. And even the Nets going on that big, they go on that big run. Like
Mm-hmm.
they were
Mm-hmm.
able to go on a really solid run uh, to push themselves back in it and put themselves in position to close that out. There was a stretch in the start of the fourth quarter for a while that I was like, oh, it looks like Utah is gonna be able to
Yeah.
close this one out. And so that's where you circle back to there's good resiliency, and just a good level of fight, which we've seen this whole year from this group.
Yeah, they were down double digits, I believe. I know it was at least 11. I think it might have been 13 midway early in the fourth. It's funny. I was watching the end of regulation with my grandmother. She's
Ooh,
95,
okay.
She's 95 years old. She does not miss a game. Huge Nets fan.
Okay,
She
Grandma Mott Kaplan. Okay.
Her heart couldn't take the ending. She had to go, and it was
That's how I
10:30.
felt.
She had to go to bed after regulation.
That's
But
how I felt, in both instances. This is past my
she's
bedtime.
Well, she said to me, I wish they just lost by 15 because that was more heartbreaking. And I said, all right, well, I get where you're coming from. However, we do have to praise the resiliency. It's better you see that than you don't. I will say, Nick Claxton said post game on the Isaiah Collier split, where the fake handoff where he gets to the rim. He says, I should have just grabbed him. We had a foul to give. And that really stuck out to me because if you recall earlier this season, I believe either against the Memphis Grizzlies, I'm forgetting the exact game, but I asked Jordy Fernandez post game. They didn't foul up 3, and he said, I asked him, is that a strategy? Do you prefer not to foul up 3? Is that sort of a principle you have? And he said, no. I tell them I'd prefer to foul here, but if you don't think you can, I like to give the players, a lot of room, a lot of leniency. They are on the court. They can make those decisions. And Nick Claxton, not fouling him. I don't want to assume what was said in the huddle, but maybe it was something like, hey, foul, we have a foul to give if you feel comfortable doing it, but, we don't want to foul a shooter, so I'm giving you, some room here to play with. That's a learning experience for this team under a first-year head coach. Nick Claxton or Noah Clowney probably can just wrap him up on the way to the basket, preventing an easy layup, but that's a lot of pressure to put on these guys in an end-of-game situation. And, year one rookie head coach, that's kind of what these situations are all about. You got to get through this end of game stuff. But it was really, they executed a lot. They executed on offense. Tyrese Martin has been playing great, misses a wide open corner 3, but that's a great possession. That would have changed the game. No complaints. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that stuff, Lucas, thanks for bringing that up. It's that stuff where it's like you had the guy on the court that you want
Mm-hmm.
taking that shot from the corner, set it
Mm-hmm.
up perfectly. That's gonna happen. Like
Yeah.
that's basketball. That's sports. That's you create, and you can't ask for much more than that. And so that's where I was like, that's the good stuff. And despite the fact you're not coming up with points or ultimately coming up with a win, you're still same thing with the Claxton look. Like that play was beautifully run and executed.
Yeah.
Um, and a great call there down the end. So those are the things you put in your notebook and you learn from it, and then the next time, you hope that experience then will benefit you.
We can definitely start, we're starting more general and we'll get to more specific players, but despite the 5-game losing streak, there are these long-term trends that I think are indicative of progress. And, the maybe Claxton execute or Noah didn't give the foul at the end of the game, but overall they are really improving on general principles under Jordi Fernandez in his first year as a head coach. We think back to the beginning of the year when they had a fouling problem and they were putting guys at the free throw line all the time, kind of struggling to be, physical without fouling. Well, they're creeping up right around league average now through the whole season in terms of free throw rate allowed. Since the new year, they're in the top half of the league, despite the losing streak. They're also, per cleaning the glass at least, exactly 15th. So exactly league average in defensive rebounding, which is a huge step up from where they were in the beginning of the season. So I think the physicality and their presence on defense is starting to be felt, and it's way closer to what I think Jordi Fernandez would want. Whereas maybe, some of the execution, some of the X outs or rotations here, but I think, to me at least, watching from home on this road trip, they're bringing like a level of physicality, grit. These sound like cliches, but the energy when you're watching, to me, seems palpable and, anything but a cliche.
Yeah, you said it, and I agree, and I couldn't agree more, and I think that's the point of, a consistency and a style of play. You see that, and you're gonna understand it. In the pregame press conference, at Utah, just the last game, Will Hardy was talking about what he's
Mhm.
seen out of this group, out of this Brooklyn Nets group, and as you could imagine, he's like, "It's been hard, so much change of personnel, change in lineup, so it's hard to distinguish a lot of things." But he said, "The one thing that always stands out to me is how organized they looked on both ends of the floor." Mm. And I would add the physicality that you've now seen consistently, but I had talked about this, I think I was talking about it in a broadcast a bunch early on with Ian, it's saying that it is you cannot overstate how impressive it is that you've got different players in and out, different looks of a lineup, and everyone always seems to know where to be and what to do and what their role is. And that's a credit to the coaching staff and Jordi Fernandez. That's a credit to the players. That's a credit to the players on the floor, off the floor that you constantly see talking. There's an engagement and an understanding of what is being asked of them. And with all the changes that have taken place, you don't always see that in teams that have consistent lineups or consistent looks of players. With this group, I think that is such a credit, to all involved. Is something that they should be really, really proud of. That's recognized as one of the tenets of, oh, this is what this group is.
And I'm really excited to see that right now, a few hours before they play Portland. I'm excited to revisit this game next week because we'll see the opportunity for a bounce back, and we'll see, Nick Claxton questionable, Cam Johnson and D'Lo questionable. You get two or all three of those guys playing. Now you have a little bit more talent, a little more bodies to work with, proven offensive talent within these schemes. So I can't wait to see how they respond over the next few days. And the other thing about the guys executing those principles is that it is the two-way guys, and we'll start to talk about more specific guys, but like that bench unit they have rocking right now is feisty. It's imperfect. It's guys that are recently joined the team, rookies, sophomores. Right now, it's Reese Beekman, who they just acquired and is a rookie, so he's probably doubly going through it in terms of a learning adjustment. That can't be easy. Tyrese Martin, Tosan Evbuomwan, who, sophomore, now on his third pro team, but really impressing. Day'Ron Sharp, and Jalen Wilson. And those are 5 guys that are going to bring it. And that bench-heavy unit cut a 22-point deficit in Denver, where it's tough to play, tough to travel to
Yes.
5 in the fourth quarter. And in the beginning of the fourth quarter against Utah, they didn't, play as well, but you can see it. You can see what's there. So I just want to ask, what's impressed you about the ability of all these young guys? You can mention specific players if you want to, but how they're able to conjure up like an offense and able to cut into these leads despite you really wouldn't think they'd be able to, just given how the deck is stacked against these guys.
It's a belief that they have in each other and in their own play, in the collective play. And again, I think a lot of that too is the coaching staff and just what they instill. Like Jordy Fernandez has said this often when asked about players being out, and I'm gonna not correctly rephrase it, but it's essentially if I'm putting Tyrese Martin in, for example, for somewhat. He should believe that he should be playing. He should
Hmm.
believe that those minutes are his. He should own, why else are you doing this if you think that you can't come in and take these opportunities and still compete in a way that others can? And I think you see that attitude in these players. They all believe that they deserve to be in this league. They all believe that they deserve NBA minutes. And they all are very unselfish in their attitude of doing it together because they understand that everyone's gonna lift each other up if you're playing the right way. And so, again, circling back, credit to them picking up concepts and paying close to whether it's film study, whether it's during the limited times of shooting practice, studying on their own, making sure they know what's needed from them on both ends of the floor. But I just think more than anything, like you could feel it, you could see it. And I said this earlier, but you could see it in the bench and
Hmm.
whether it's players, playing, whether it's some of those that are injured, they're constantly talking to their teammates. Bojan Bogdanovic is a guy, for example, who has not played yet, been around the league forever, has found a ton of success. Timeouts are called, you see him, whether it's talking to guys or having communicating. I mean, obviously Cam Johnson, you see that all the time with him being out, D'Angelo Russell. I can go down the list, but
Yeah.
there is a collectivity of this group that they want to see their teammates succeed. They will compete their behinds off against one another when needed. But whoever the five are on the floor, they want to see those guys succeed. And I think that translates in a very real way.
And it makes the losses a little, way more palatable than they otherwise have a right to be in terms of, I think, the viewing experience. It is a lot easier to watch a team that fights hard and maybe misses shots or whatever the case may be than the reverse. And I think this team, regardless of who's on the floor, it really is the whole organization from like the beginning of the year to now. I think there have been 24 different players to take the court, which is just a staggering number. And they've all fought, and that's made it a joy to watch at more than it should be for a 5-game losing streak. So I ask you, is it fair to say that Tyrese Martin is the recipient of the Sarah Kustok Brooklyn's Finest Award of the Week as we move
See,
into giving out awards?
I have a tie. I
She
have a
has a tie.
tie. I think it's the TT, Tyrese and Tosan.
Mm,
I think both those guys have been extremely impressive, and it showed up in different ways from Tyrese Martin.
right.
You could see it in just him being around, but he does the right things. He knows where to be. He's got a level of poise and composure, regardless of what's happening on the floor, that I think is really important. And I think his growth and evolution around his role of what's being asked of him, and it's stuff that it's not like out of the character of who he is as a basketball
Hmm.
player, but the fact that in lots of ways he's initiating the offense and playing point and
Yeah. I
how
didn't
much
know.
he's
I didn't
yeah,
know he could do all that. I didn't know
yeah.
he could do all that.
And how much he's balanced, you see it. Like we know he could shoot, we know he could score, but I think too, even the comfort level he's had when he gets in the paint, uh, it doesn't get sped up. Some of those extra Euro steps or moves or counter moves, depending on what a defense is doing, he seems so comfortable out there. And to add in, I think in the defensive side of the ball, like right place, right angles, all of that, but I added in Tosan too because the fact that he has just come with the team and he's made some big time plays. I think he does the little things, uh, a lot of those qualities of being just composed and confident, and how he shows up on the floor, I think, has been a great value for this group. and has been a lot of fun to kind of see what he's already grown into, and just kind of the potential of what he may have in this league.
Yeah, and they're two different players, and they're two very like fun evaluations for us because we're getting to know these guys. We're really, we didn't know a lot, if anything, about them before the season, and so this is really our first impression of them. And when you're looking at Tyrese Martin, it's okay. This is probably like an off guard wing sort of player. Has to shoot the three ball. But like I mentioned, I really didn't know he had this level of craft and decision making once he gets in the
Good
paint.
word, yeah.
Some of these kick out passes that he's thrown with like his left hand and his right hand when he's in the air, finding, 3-point shooters in the corner. He had the alley oop to Nick that was just off for the win, but right before that, he drove the lane and had a dump off pass for a made basket from Nick at the last second when they were down 194. It cut it to 196. And it's just, he gets by his man or he attacks his man, but I didn't really know he could read the next level of defense like this. And so that's been really inspiring to see. And you think, okay, maybe when guys return from injury and he comes back and he's not handling the ball as much, that's a pretty projectable skill. Like if he has to attack closeouts, he can create, really high level offense. It's funny, you think about a guy like when Royce O'Neal was here, how many good passes he'd make when a guy would fly by him off closeouts.
Yes.
Tyrese Martin reminds me a little bit of that, but might be a better finisher. So I'm really excited about his offense.
And I was just gonna say that, and speaking of, and I think because I didn't realize this, having
Mhm.
watched him before until we got he's pretty big. Like, he's
Yeah,
6'6", he's 215 or so, 220. Like, he's got a good frame, he's got good size. Sometimes when you watch how he moves or how he is on the court, I feel like there's a couple extra inches maybe I hadn't given him, and that's where you see, to your point about him finishing or shots he gets
right.
off, that matters.
Yeah, just like functionally athletic, in a way where he can jump from outside the restricted area, like raise up to finish at the rim, and then have enough left to, okay, let me fire a kick out pass. Or, okay, let me dump it off. Like, that's not something you see a lot from two-way guys that, or maybe not primary initiators. You'd think that's what they would struggle with, but he's actually impressing with that. So I'm really excited for him to get more minutes. And then with Tosan, he was my Brooklyn's finest. How could he not be? So seamless transition there. He just kind of like does anything. And I mean that in a extremely positive way because, again, young guy, doesn't have a ton of NBA experience, new team. You notice him on like every possession. You
Every
just notice
possession.
him. He's just doing
Yes.
something, which is, in my opinion, pretty rare for a guy in
Yes.
his position, don't you think?
Great description. Great description.
And again, functionally athletic. Like when he closes out, I mentioned this last week, he's big, he's kind of overwhelming. And normally with guys, I think, trying to make an NBA roster, an NBA rotation, cement themselves, you look, okay, what does this guy do at an NBA level? Like, what is his one skill that's going to keep him on the court? And then what's everything, is the rest of his game up to snuff? Tosan's a little different because it's like, he might just do a lot of stuff pretty well. Like he might be able to bang down low and close out on the perimeter and handle the ball in transition and shoot, his career 36.3% from three across G League and NBA. And he's finishing at the rim and he's got a little floater game. He kind of just does everything. And like the play where he made the go-ahead free throws in Utah, they were down one with 10 seconds left. He fakes a dribble handoff and gets to the rim. I don't know a lot of two-way guys playing their fifth career game with a team that would have the guts to do that in the most important possession of the game.
Big time play. And on top of that, I think leading up to those free throws, he was 4 of 7 from the line or something like that. Like it's
Right.
not
Yeah.
like he'd been to the line a good amount, but it's not like I think for most of his trips to the line, he has split most of those attempts. And so knocking down, like, that was another great, that play alone, but then in that moment, knocking down both those free throws, I feel like you see he's hit some other big shots in very
Mhm.
timely moments That stuff is impressive. Again, on top of the fact that he's on a new team,
Right.
and he's trying to really create his space here in the league.
Jordy, this system could be really nice for him. He is the all-time single season record holder for assists in a year at Princeton, his senior year. He took them to the tournament as like true point forward, handling the ball. So that Utah game, it clicked for me. It's like, oh, this is a guy, fake handoffs, split action at the top of the key, hitting cutters, stuff like that. Just a matchup problem on both ends of the court. Big enough, to hang with the big guys and bully small guys, and quick enough, he drove right around Kyle Filipowski a couple times in the first half to get all the way to the rim. I'm just a fan. He just does something on every possession that I'm like, oh, let me write that down. So that's pretty. Nets have two pretty unique two-way guys, and then shout out Reese Beekman, who's been a part of a lot of these units. A question with him is we know he can guard. He's hit 2 huge catch-and-shoot threes. He cut it to 5 in Denver, and then he had 1 against Utah. I forget, in the second half. But all these guys making their case to play even as the Nets get healthy. And you have now a lot of candidates to choose from. Maybe some guys coming back. Ben Simmons came back from a brief injury absence and had a strong game in Utah. Who is your next Net? Who do you want to see this next week? Maybe have some questions. Maybe are excited to watch them play.
I already talked about him. Tosan.
Yeah,
that's my answer. Absolutely. That's my answer.
Yeah, I should pick him, but I'm gonna cheat a little bit because obviously I'm excited to watch Tosan play. I just have a few questions or a few moments of intrigue with Jalen Wilson. The shooting hasn't quite been there from 3 as much as it was in the early season. So I just want to know, what is he doing to affect the game otherwise? He's had a couple possessions with some strong takes to the rim. He's had a couple turnovers. He's had flashes on defense. Other times he's gotten beaten off the dribble. So I'm really curious in this next week and the rest of the season to see what his B skill is, or what keeps him on the court when he isn't on fire from 3 as he was to start the year. Do you have any prediction as to what that skill might be, what you might want to see from him?
I just think in general, it's not even necessarily a skill. Like, just keep doing the little things. Like what you're doing on the defensive end, rebounding, cutting hard, taking open shots, be who you are. And I think that's challenge. There was so much on him early on in the season with one, how he was shooting, but just playing really well, the fit, the wins, all of that stuff. He's still in his second year, and you're going to have ups and downs. You're going to go through moments. But from him, I just want to see his confidence level remain as high as it was, in what it is. Keep learning, keep improving, but more so it's all those other areas of keep doing that type of work, and the shot will eventually fall, and the shot is there. He can shoot, but making sure it's not affecting the other areas on the floor.
Completely. And he'd be, having more cuts to the rim, which we know he can do if the Nets had some of their primary ball handlers healthy. His looks from 3 would be probably a little cleaner. It's not the best environment for him right now, compared to what it was in the beginning of the season. But
absolutely,
pressure makes diamonds. So I'm excited to see these guys all navigate situations. That's when you really learn about players.
Yep.
And I have extreme faith in Jalen Wilson, aka the light-skinned Tom Brady, to get it done. I don't know if you saw what Nets Twitter posted, but it was pretty funny. And with that, we will move to trivia. Sarah has to go to Portland. Has to go to the arena. I'm sitting in my bedroom.
I do.
Sarah,
this can't be my game attire unless
I'm just talking. Sarah's got to go to real grown-up work, so I will just ask. We talked about a losing streak a few times. We'll end on a positive note. What do you think the longest winning streak is in Nets franchise history? And
15.
bonus
15.
for when? 14. Very, very good guess, though. It happened twice in New Jersey. Most recent time, 2005, 2006, led by the man behind me, Vince Carter.
Yeah. Why did
you feel like
I felt like it was no, I don't. I trust you with my whole heart. For some reason, I felt like I was talking about that before, maybe with Vince, and I thought it was 15, and there was maybe the number was just playing in my mind. But yeah, 14. Oh, we're right there though. We're right there.
Yeah. Well, perhaps it's
I'm
end of
speaking it
season. It
into
ended April
existence.
8th. Yeah, this is going to be the start of a
Oh,
15
like
game win streak.
like a
Yeah, maybe.
carryover?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't count that, but I appreciate I mean, I'm with you. Although it can be impressive, but sometimes when people really count that, like, over the
I
off
know.
season
I
it
don't like.
feels a little
I don't like that.
yeah.
Preseason, postseason. Anyway, it's 14. But we'll get back to that soon. And shout out Vince Carter, who was big, leading scorer
It's
during that stretch.
about to be jersey
About to be
retirement
that
night.
time.
Ooh-wee.
January 25th against the Heat. Get your tickets. And until then, we have this episode. We have another episode coming out, next week before that. I'm sure we'll talk about Vince a little more. This has been episode 12 of The Backcourt, a Brooklyn Nets podcast presented to you by Ticketmaster. Thank you guys so much for listening. Rate, subscribe, like the video, however you're listening or watching to us.
All the
Sarah and I really
stars.
appreciate it. Of course. What else would you rate it? You guys have a good week. We will see you next Wednesday. Thanks for listening.